All right, we're live. What's up, party people? Oops, my name is Sunny Ray. This is the Sunny Ray Show. We are back. I think this is what our second or third interview today. This next gentleman is very interesting. I had a very interesting conversation with him a couple weeks ago and was quite taken aback by his story. His name is Ryan Hawley. He didn't just take a straight line to owning a conglomerate. He started as a nurse, then moved into international air ambulance work that put him on the ground across 143 countries. I didn't even know there were that many countries. Today, Odin Industries is the vehicle. Three segments under one roof. So case management and veteran disability medical business built around Defense Base Act and Nexus DBQ work. So I'm going to bring on Ryan. Hey, Ryan, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Excellent. Yeah, I'm excited. You've got quite the journey, it seems. I like to start with just going right in the deep end. What is Odin Industries? What are you guys building? We'll keep it short and sweet for now, but we'll go deeper into it later on in the interview.
Sure. So Odin Industries is the biggest of the three businesses that I oversee. Focuses on Defense Base Act, basically workers' compensation for foreign nationals that are working ancillary to the military in some capacity. So they're working for an American military contractor. Could be food service workers, could be interpreters, could be carpenters, security workers, anyone that's not enlisted. We manage their claims globally. So set up their appointments, get their medical records, help facilitate medical legal opinions, vocational assessments, and all of these workers were tied to a combat zone in some regard. And then we recently purchased, it's been about a year now, a medical practice that focuses on doing nexuses and DBQs for veterans that are applying for disability benefits. And then we have a holding company that we buy up foreclosed or tax liened property and either renovate them and flip them, or we've got a couple that we've turned into Airbnbs and things of that nature. So
that's super cool. So I guess let's just slow it down a little bit. Let's go back. So I was let's talk about the story, I guess, before the empire.
okay.
So you trained as a nurse before any of this. What pulled you towards medicine first, and what did that early version of you think your life was going to look like?
I actually wanted to be a firefighter, and there just wasn't many jobs at that time. And it was actually my stepfather, Murray, that pushed me towards nursing. I was looking at options, paramedic things. He was a paramedic, and with there not being many jobs in firefighting, he said, well, why don't you try nursing? He said, you can get a degree rather than a diploma, and it opens a lot of doors for being able to do different things. It's higher paying than a paramedic, and why don't you try that? For about 3.5 years, I absolutely hated it. That it just wasn't what I wanted to do with my life. And then despite hating it, I got pretty good marks and was able to pick where I wanted to go for consolidation. And I picked emergency, and something just clicked. It felt like home. I think I liked the chaos, and I like that sort of adrenaline rush that comes from the emergency room. And spent, I think, all of my years bedside but one, at least practicing in some capacity in an emergency. I left for 1 year and did critical care, and it just wasn't for me. That I like during my breaks, I would go down to the ER and hang out. That it was like I missed the chaos or something. So
Wow. And then somewhere along the way, nursing turned into international air ambulance work across.
I was a couple years into my nursing career, and I had a charge nurse by the name of Clint Attendito. And he worked for a flight company, and he was always wowing me with stories of, I went over to London last week, or I went to Barcelona. So I bugged him until he got me a job. And it started where I was doing just occasional, flights. And then a salaried position came up. So I was flying 2 weeks of the month every month, and might be in 4 countries in a week. So we were working mostly for travel insurance companies, bringing sick people home that they've traveled somewhere abroad. And it was with a financial model for the air ambulances, the trips are paid as a return trip. So if they can find a patient to bring on a backhaul back stateside, that's almost all profit for them. So they'll work very hard to, if we're dropping off in, say, Europe, to find a European that needs to come back to North America, because that's about 100% profit for the plane, because the trip's already been paid for on a return. So going over to Europe, that client had already paid for the gas and fees and everything to get the plane back to North America. So if they find somebody from Europe to put in the plane, they're making double the profit on that. So we would get to stay, 2-3 days at a time while they looked for a backhaul. Called it like 2-bit brownie tourism. I wouldn't get to see all of things, but I would get to hang out in these amazing cities for a day or two and see something, like go tour Prague Castle, or go to the Louvre, or I do a lot of dark tourism stuff. So I've been to the Killing Fields, I've been to Chernobyl. I've gone to some pretty interesting places, and it was a job that afforded me to see things that I never would have saw just doing, regular vacationing or my own travel. It was probably the best job in the world for being in your 20s or 30s.
So, and then, air ambulance is high stakes logistics under pressure. Like what did you learn about moving people and resources through places where the normal systems just don't work?
It's like any strong business. It's built on a team. So you have a logistics team that's managing getting visas into the various countries, getting landing permits, organizing our accommodations, things of that nature. You've got the pilots that are skilled at flying and keeping us safe. Then you have medical staff that are dealing with often critical patients. Like, we transported patients that were on ventilators regularly, keeping that person alive and dealing with the unexpected. You have a mechanical issue on the plane, or, one of your staff gets sick. It's not like a hospital where you can call in a replacement. You're in another country and there's not really a backup plan. So everyone needs to work together. There needs to be systems in place to make things, work well. And if you're someone that can't change and adapt on the fly, it's not going to be a job you're going to like.
And then before, I guess you were an owner, like what were the moments or people that shaped how you think about risk and reward?
I think I've always had sort of an entrepreneurial bug. The first business I ever started, I was 17 years old, and I started a rave promotion company and a small record label. And, that was in order to provide events in order for us to provide events and have distribution for our own music. That, I started that business so we could get on bills and be booked to play various parties. And when we created music, to have a distribution channel and not have to shop it to other labels to get it put out. So I was 17. I was in high school when we started this business, and we grew it to the point where we were having very large scale parties. We were one of the bigger drum and bass names in the Toronto rave scene during the sort of height of drum and bass in Toronto. So it was a lot of fun. But, that's a huge risk business. We were renting out clubs, we were picking which talent that would resonate with the crowd. And, we were kids. It's not like there was a lot of economic means that quite literally we'd be risking the house on a party. I remember being, 23, 24, and we had flown somebody in from LA to perform. And, if the party didn't do well, I didn't have rent money. It was literally a risk the house kind of scenario. So that definitely helped shape me. One of my favorite hobbies is poker, and I think poker teaches you a lot about realizing risk and managing risk in a structured fashion. So, I think some of that built me, and I was fortunate to have managers, charge nurses liked that liked to challenge me and saw something in me to help me keep pushing myself. So
That's super interesting. So you've also said that, price is rarely the real deciding factor, that execution matters much more. Where did that conviction come from in your early career?
yeah, I think it's just something that we learned along the way, that the case management business, which is one of our biggest grossing revenue streams right now, came about pretty serendipitously. That at the time I was running Going Home Medical and focusing on transports predominantly out of Iraq and Afghanistan. So supporting defense efforts in that regard. And we had a client call us and ask us to get medical records out of Chad. Said, I don't have any medical staff in Chad. I've got a special forces guy that's left the military and is now doing, I assume mercenary work there or something of the sort. Said he doesn't need to understand the records. He just needs to get them for us. So I phoned up my buddy and he got us the records. I didn't even know how to invoice this service. I was just trying to do a client a favor. And they phoned the next day and asked, could we do the same thing in Uganda if we could get the records out of Kampala? The light bulb went on my head that this is a pain point for them. So I set up a meeting and we talked about it. And they said, yeah, we have these issues all over Africa, all over the Balkans. So I got on a plane and started building out a network to be able to facilitate getting these records. And it went from a serendipitous phone call to about 50 to 80,000 a month in revenue in under 6 months. So it wasn't a business that I had planned to get into, but it was a very, very profitable niche that there wasn't a lot of competitors in, that you're dealing with staff, contractor staff in fairly low wage countries, that we can pay them much better than they would be paid working at a store or doing whatever in their own country. So they're happy that they're getting more than they could make on their own, and we're able to keep pretty fantastic margins on supplying that foreign labor to facilitate these tasks. And then it's just sort of grown based on client needs. We built out a whole vocational team to start doing vocational assessments and labor market surveys because they asked if we could do it. And before I hired Cecilia full-time to do the vocational assessments, I didn't even really know what they were. I would go on Google, I would find somebody to facilitate getting it done for them, and we would charge a small booking fee with a vendor. And they started asking for them more and more, and I said I should probably hire a vocational expert. So I did. So rather than paying a vendor, we've now got one inside that our nurse case managers, they're facilitating insurance claims. So often these claims are in some process of litigation, and that often ends in a settlement. You are talking foreign countries. Some of them are not the most stable places in the world, that there was a need to make sure that the insurance companies weren't going against any sanctions to facilitate payment to this person, and confirm that the bank account, that if they're going to wire the 20,000 or 30,000 or whatever the settlement is, that it's going to go to the appropriate person, because you can't take a wire back once it's sent. So we identified that. We worked through with our clients. We subscribed to a platform that we're able to do checks against 200 sanctions list and facilitate a $1 test wire to confirm either with the claimant or with the claimant's attorney that the bank account is correct, and then give the thumbs up to the insurance company that they're good to go ahead and send the settlement. That was a problem that was identified. We do it about 200 times a month now. And it's just identifying the problems that our clients, which are the employers of the insurance, are having, and figuring out a solution and figuring out what the pricing model is going to be to make it work. And we're kind of one of those companies that our client asks us, can you do this? The answer is always yes, and we'll figure it out. So
That's super interesting. Actually, I was going to ask you about that. So how do you decide, kind of like what kind of client requests are worth building in-house versus keeping as a partner or vendor so that the business doesn't become too custom either, right?
The safeguarding for the claims came out of necessity for the clients, that they needed that done. And it gave a foot in the door for more profitable work, such as nurse case management or the vocational assessments. The building of the vocational team, those reports cost $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 at a time. And I saw that they were, being requested all the time. It was like, why am I going to give somebody else $3,000 and, make $50 for facilitating that when, we can make that? And it's much like the medical legal opinions. It's like I'm paying for the staff's knowledge, that's there's very little cost. They need some sort of word processing software. They need the ability to review medical records, and they need expertise in a certain area that we can charge out for the utilization of their time. That we bill very similar to a law firm, that we bill in 6-minute increments for any of the medical legal opinions that we give. So whether it's a vocational assessment, whether it's an independent medical examination, any of these expert opinions, it's just billed on straight time, same as a law firm would if they were preparing a case for you. And it's worked out very, very well. So
cool. Hey, was there like an early failure or, I don't know, hard lesson that you now see as kind of the thing that set up everything after it?
the previous company that I started, the one that we had discussed earlier, that we were doing the medical transport, I sold it. I left everything that I had known in Southern Ontario for my entire life and packed up and moved to South Florida and stayed on for 5 years to run the company that I had started and sold to someone else. And I hated it. I didn't align with the people that I sold the company to well. I didn't have function of control to change the things that I wanted to change because it was no longer my company. And it was, if I had a time machine, I would go back and unsign that contract and not sell the business. And it, became contentious. It became, to the point that I would be sitting in my car talking myself to go into the office, which is a difficult place to be. And, starting Odin was, I left that business and didn't really have a plan for what was next. I just knew I didn't want to do that anymore. But I knew I was pretty good at this. And it seems in that way that the clients came. One of our first clients was one of the largest security firms in the world. That they had dealt with us in previous capacities. In that regard, and said, Ryan, can you still do this? And I'm like, well, I didn't forget. Like when I quit the other business, I didn't erase my memory. And they started working with us, and the ball started rolling again, and we were profitable probably 3-4 months after inception. That I was able to start growing and hiring on more employees, building the business, and we continue to scale every year. It's we haven't had a down year. That every year we've made a little bit more. That it's continuing to grow, and I think a lot of that's based on our reputation and our ability to execute in places that other people can't. So.
And how did going through that exit teach you? Like, what did it teach you that kind of changed how you build now?
As far as changing what I built now, that I have a direct line of control over the kind of things that we want to support, the kind of things that we want to align the business with, which was one of the things that I struggled with previously. That we'll say from a political standpoint, our ideologies didn't really align, and it made it difficult. I think I learned. I think I learned better negotiating skills to better prepare for another exit. That first one, you kind of you get the check, a job came along with it, and I look back on it now, probably could have got a better deal, probably have structured it more, and it made me look at myself and go, what should I have changed about this process? And Odin's a thing. Eventually I'm going to want to retire, whatever that looks like, but eventually I'm going to want to do something different. So I've always known with starting Odin that an exit is the probable outcome at some point. And I was able to start with building Odin with that in mind, that at some point that there's going to be a desire to sell the business and to build it into something that's marketable and something that there's buyers for. So.
Yeah, that's super interesting. When did you first see the Defense Base Act, kind of the niche, the way you see it now, a space where almost every claim ends up in litigation and there are more buyers than sellers?
It was that serendipitous phone call with the client to get those medical records out of Chad that started me down this road. And the more I got to know about the business, to understand the act, to understand how it's adjudicated, and how it's kind of a Wild West frontier of law, that the biggest gathering for our particular industry is a continuing legal education conference to talk about how case law has changed the outcomes of claims adjudication this year. And it's fascinating. Like you're watching legal precedents being built through this small group of judges and this extremely super niche area. I found it fascinating that your sort of boring insurance stuff, that this is kind of the complete other side of that, where we're facilitating exciting things every day, something different, and it's a constantly changing landscape based on laws that need to be made up under some unique circumstances of how to manage things. So one of the topics at the conference this year was, the different countries, I guess, regulations with regards to deposing someone. Like, how do you legally depose someone in Uganda that's not an American citizen, that's a foreign of another nation? That, like, what do? Do you go through the embassy? Do you need, each country's got a different process. Is there any willingness to work with an American court? There's some places that I've heard of people getting arrested for working with American courts and cooperating with them. There's other countries, like I think it's Kosovo, that went, well, these law firms are trying to get money for people from here to facilitate the process. And they worked with the judges on the circuit here in the US to develop a standardized process to make depositions occur and facilitate the court cases. And it's that sort of thing that I find fascinating. It's always changing. There's all these really unique problems that you need to figure out. And it's rewarding work. And same as the other business, the business that we bought, every day I get to help veterans get the money that they should get for the time that they served helping, our country. That's work I can feel good about. That it's, every day we get thank you letters and people that they're now getting some additional financial security for injuries that they sustained while they were in the military. That can change a person's life. That, you know,
What's something you believe about this business that most people in your space would flatly disagree with?
I that people would flatly disagree with. That's a tough one. I'm not sure.
Hmm. Let's switch gears. We can come back to that one later, right? So,
Yeah.
I wanted to can you walk me through Odin Industries today? Like, how do the three pieces, like case management, security, and property, actually like fit together, or is the point that they kind of don't have to?
They don't have to. They each sit as separate LLCs under the holding company. They each do something unique. That the business that we bought doing the Nexus and DBQs is highly financially successful and could stand alone. That it could be something that could sell on its own. It's not dependent on the case management business itself. That every month it gets more profitable, but it kind of aligned with the medical legal opinions that we were doing on the case management side. That we're kind of working both sides of the fence with the two different companies. That Odin works predominantly with the employer and the insurer, and Shield of Odin, the veteran-based business, works directly with the claimant themselves. So we're kind of doing similar work on opposite sides of the fence with the two company. And the property business, we moved to a small town in coastal North Carolina called Elizabeth City. And there was a number of city-owned properties that were being sold. You could go, online and look at them, and I drive around town and see some of these abandoned houses. And we're going through kind of a renaissance now. Like Ryan Holmes has got 7 or 8 different subdivisions that are going up around us. It's got a pretty close proximity to the Norfolk Naval Base. It's got one of the biggest Coast Guard bases in the country, I think second to the Washington base. So there's built-in clientele with the military's involvement in and around the city, and it's cheap. So we were fortunate enough to be able to pick up houses for a song that I think you and I spoke about, the one that we just bought on the river. It's an acre on the river. It's a 2-bedroom home, and we got it for $11,000. So that leaves lots of room to be able to do renovations and turn them over and make a significant profit on those renovations. So that literally has nothing to do with any of the other businesses, but it was an opportunity that presented itself, and we had the financial means to do it. So we started doing it, and we made a bunch of money from it. So
Ryan, you're not raising, but like VCs and family offices are already kind of knocking. So what does it do to how you run the business when the capital is chasing you instead of the other way around?
I don't know that it's really changed how we operate. That some of our vendors or partners that we work alongside have come from those discussions, and that's maybe laying the groundwork for an exit down the road. I'm not ready to leave yet. We're still growing it, but some of those companies that have kicked our tires to see if we're for sale, we've looked how their businesses operate and on things that we can align on, and maybe start doing some work together, understand how they operate, that rather than a pitch deck from some equity group, looking at the businesses that they've acquired or the businesses that they're running and see how they operate and see if maybe they're a good fit for down the road. And other than that, we just keep doing what we're doing. That it's I'll take a phone call from anybody that wants to talk about giving me money, but I'm not quite ready to pack it in yet. So it's it's interesting to have those discussions to see what others are looking for. And I think the fact that we're now back into combat with no particular end on the horizon, there's going to be an influx of new claims with the insurance companies. And much like with the Iraq and Afghanistan conflicts, it's going to start turning into fresh claims in our specific niche. And I think that's why some of these VCs are starting to kick tires of various businesses, because there's going to be another rush at some point. That if, God forbid, we send ground troops in, it's going to be one that we're not going to get out of there forever. And if you have any sort of military action, there's going to be injuries. There's going to be claims that need to be facilitated. And the American military needs a lot of assistance. That they hire a ton of contractors to perform various functions. That's our bread and butter. That the military take care of their own, but the U.S. contractors that are going over there to either do rebuilding or to facilitate combat or what have you, that we're sort of the pointy end of the spear to manage those claims. And we bill strictly on a time basis. And then, a DBA claim may stick around for 6, 7, 10 years. Like that's a long tail that we're able to continue to bill on each claim. So
sounds like a pretty awesome business. So for an operator, watching this, who's sitting on a profitable business in an maybe overlooked niche, what's the one thing you would tell them about setting up a clean exit?
Make sure that your financial house is in order, that your documents are clean. Speak to people that have facilitated exits in the past and understand what that process looks like. Understand what due diligence is going to look like. And when you are getting ready to sell, have those things prepared, that you're able to tell a compelling story to facilitate that sale, rather than them having to conduct an investigation and it's a disorganized mess. That if you are planning to exit, it's not a rash decision. It's something that should be built the same way you build your business. That you should take that time to build a system of how you want to leave and what that should look like, rather than just, get sick and decide that you need to sell your business on a whim or something. That if a business should never be just tied to the owner, that there should be systems in place that the business can run without you. And if somebody's going to buy something from you, much like any commodity, they need to be able to see the value of what your business is. So, starting well before you exit to narrate that story is super important. So.
Awesome, Ryan. Well, help me land the plane here. So I guess zoom out. Like, where do you think this whole defense services and case management space is heading over the next 5 years? And where does Odin want to be standing when it gets there?
So we hadn't been in combat since 2001. Yet this year there's been more Defense Base Act claims filed than there ever has before. We're now back into active combat, where we're going to have a whole new combat related set of claims. This particular business has got nowhere to go but up. That it's a niche that's going to continue to grow, and U.S. military contractors aren't going anywhere. That AI is not going to replace the military machine that makes America work. So we've got built-in security with that. There's going to be new claim opportunities in new regions related to the conflicts that are going on now. That should the Ukraine-Russia conflict end, odds are there are going to be some American firms that are involved in the rebuilding. That the Iranian, situation. Odds are there will be American firms that are related to that. It's from a moral standpoint something that I'm not happy that we're at war right now, but from a business standpoint, it leads to a profitable future for our particular niche.
Gotcha. Cool. All right, Ryan. So thank you so much. I see we have quite a few people listening as well. Thank you all for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Ryan, I'm gonna bring this one to a close. Where do people learn more about your company? Where do people learn more about you?
Odin Industries LLC.com is the webpage. Odin Industries is our handle on the various social media platforms. And if you're interested in just me in particular, it's Odin_CEO. So
You're on LinkedIn, you said, or that's your website?
No, the Odin_CEO is like Instagram and whatever other social channels that we're on. If you're a veteran looking for those services, it's shieldofodin.com. And LinkedIn, I'm Ryan L. Hawley. So
awesome. All right, Ryan, thank you again. Ryan, hang out for like 1 minute. I'm going to bring this stream to an end. Until next time, everyone. Cheers.